Ghost Trick Phantom Detective is one of the most brilliant games I have ever played. It manages to weave together a masterful story that's filled to the brim with subtle foreshadowing, earth-shattering twists, and a simply fascinating world. There's a lot of things that I can talk about when it comes to this game, but as I reach its final chapters, there were two characters in particular that really stuck out to me and made me reconsider how I view several of the game's themes as a whole. And coincidentally, the identities of these characters are debatably the biggest reveals in the entire game. So while I know that I already put a spoiler warning at the beginning of this video, I really need to re-emphasize here that if you have yet to play this masterpiece of a game for yourself, then I strongly encourage you do so before pressing onwards. I can say with full confidence that you will not regret it. Alright, we're good? Great. As I stated, the identity of the two characters that I'm referring to is concealed in mystery for the majority of the game, yet both of them were able to leave a major impression on me for entirely different, yet interconnected reasons. These characters are Yomiel, the game's main villain and true identity of the man that Sissel assumed he was for the majority of the game, and Ray, the mysterious lamp that assists Sissel at the beginning of the game. To me, these two characters represent two sides of the same coin. Both of them lost everything they had in exchange for ghostly powers that they didn't ask for, and were forced to endure living in a weird space between life and death for 10 whole years. But the way that each of them handled their respective situations says a lot about what it means to be immortal, how it feels to be trapped in a purgatory, and what the concept of a ghost even is in the first place. And so today, I'm going to be analyzing both characters in depth in order to determine how Ghost Trick Phantom Detective depicts the concept of purgatory through them, and how that enhances the story as a whole. Let's begin. Yomiel is quite the interesting character to dissect because it's easy to remember a time when the player wasn't even aware of his existence. For the majority of the game, players were led to believe that the identity of this man right here is Sissel, the protagonist of the game who lost his life in its intro and is searching for answers about who exactly he is and how exactly he died. And this is why, when beginning Chapter 15, players are thrown for quite a loop when they return to the Superintendent's office to find the aftermath of the very man that Sissel believed himself to be, shooting Inspector Cabanela. This reveal completely transforms everything the player thought they knew up until this point. But before they're even able to comprehend everything that this changes, they're thrust back to 4 minutes before Inspector Cabanela's death so that they can find out what exactly took place between him and this mysterious man. And as they do, they're immediately shown that this is the true identity of the Manipulator, an entity that has been pulling the strings from behind the scenes using his powerful ghostly abilities that were granted to him by the meteorite fragment that was lodged into his back 10 years ago. In addition to granting him ghostly powers that rival Sissel's, this meteorite fragment prevents his body from sustaining any form of damage, which allows him to instantly recover from any and all fatal blows. It's these abilities that have allowed him to carry out various crimes together with Commander Sith and his organization, and his awareness of Sissel's presence in the ghost world makes him quite a powerful threat. It was previously hinted at that this man may or may not have been up to some shady business prior to his supposed death, but to see it come to fruition all at once as soon as he's back in action can be quite shocking, as he immediately lets his villainous and nefarious side shine through, haunting and toying with Cabanela before swiftly taking care of him with his own gun. And his reasons for doing all of this? Revenge. Revenge against everyone who contributed to stealing his life away 10 years ago. However, the specifics of why exactly he wants revenge are petty to say the least. While he certainly is in the right for resenting the police force for wrongfully suspecting him of a crime he didn't commit, he specifically blames Inspector Cabanela, Detective Jowd, and even Lynn for placing him in a position that would leave him with no choice other than to hold Lynn at gunpoint, which naturally led to him being struck by the meteorite fragment on that fateful night. Rather than take accountability for his own actions, he claims that it's Inspector Cabanela's fault for accidentally leaving his own gun behind with him, Detective Jowd's fault for backing him into a corner at Temsec Park, and Lynn's fault for just so happening to be at the park that he ran into. Now, this reasoning is flawed, to say the least. In the words of Inspector Cabanela, it's some of the most self-centered garbage I've ever heard. The Manipulator doesn't necessarily present himself as an irredeemable monster during his first appearance, as there is certainly some nuance to his backstory, but overall, his personality appears to be twisted and malicious, and his actions in the present don't necessarily make him look any better. as he murders both Inspector Cabanela and the superintendent working with him in cold blood before swiftly taking his leave. After saving both of them from their fates, Sissel resolves to give chase to the Manipulator together with Detective Jowd and Lynn, leading them to the submarine where Commander Sith has been conducting his operations and where Jowd's daughter Camila is being kept. There, they learn that Sith has been planning on betraying his supernatural accomplice for quite some time, demonstrated by when he removes the meteorite fragment from his body and shoots a torpedo at the submarine in order to sink it while he escapes, leaving Detective Jowd, Lynn, and even the Manipulator himself with no way to escape themselves. Despite this, the Manipulator himself is completely unaware of the fact that he's actively being betrayed because he's far too busy possessing Camila so that he can murder both Lynn and Detective Jowd to finally complete his revenge. This scene really serves to reinforce what the player already knew about the Manipulator already. He's a twisted, downright evil villain who is so consumed with his own obsession for revenge that he's not even thinking logically anymore. Instead, he's dead set on ending the lives of those that he believes have wronged him in the most disturbing way possible. After Sissel's able to prevent Lynn's death once more and buy her and Camila some precious time before the submarine is fully submerged in water, the Manipulator is nowhere to be seen until he miraculously saves the group from drowning by taking control of a large collection of objects at once. Once he raises them up, he's noticeably more passive, making no effort to put an end to Lynn and instead being willing to sit down and have a chat with her. When Lynn questions why he's suddenly changed so much, he simply says that he doesn't know. Though he goes on to explain that given the circumstances, there's nothing that either of them can do to prevent both of them from meeting their ends at the bottom of the sea, though it's likely that he doesn't see a point in pursuing his revenge any longer. Instead of attacking, he simply decides to explain a bit about how exactly his powers work. It seems that being struck by the meteorite fragment 10 years ago seems to have perpetually stopped his body at the moment before his death. And so, for the past 10 years, he has simply existed, not really alive and not really dead, trapped in a strange in-between, unable to really reap the benefits of either life or death. And despite every action that he's taken to end Lynn's life, listening to his story causes Lynn to shed a tear and feel genuine pity for him. She tells him that she understands how he feels now that she's at the bottom of a submarine, because now she understands the feeling of sinking slowly to the bottom of an endless sea, completely cut off from the world. This sudden showing of empathy stuns the Manipulator for a moment, as he likely wasn't expecting it from a woman he's been attempting to kill multiple times. But before he can even process it, the group devises a plan to reach Detective Jowd, where the Manipulator's now fully dead corpse is being kept. As soon as they make it there, Jowd decides to shed some light on the details of the Manipulator's past, revealing his true name to be Yomiel. He explains that Yomiel was once one of the best system engineers in the industry, but due to the project he was working on being part of a secret international plot, he was soon labeled as a suspect, which catalyzed the fateful night where he was struck by a meteorite fragment. Yomiel himself continues by reflecting on that moment and how exactly it changed his life forever.
My soul was split from my body, and I lost everything. I was sealed in eternal darkness. I existed in this world, no question about that. But nobody noticed my presence. What good were my powers? They didn't help anybody. Not even the passage of time could heal my pain. In fact, it only made it worse. I wanted to disappear, but I wasn't even allowed to do that. The way Line described it is exactly right. Sinking slowly towards the bottom of an endless sea. An overwhelming feeling of loneliness and despair. And I wanted all of you to suffer what I was suffering. It was the twisted wish of a mind poisoned by infinite loneliness.
To me, this is the monologue that completely shifted Yomiel's character from a twisted and maniacal villain to a tragic victim of an event nobody could have predicted. And that's because it made me really consider an important question. what is a ghost? Or to be more specific, what is a ghost meant to represent? The concept of a ghost is a restless spirit, a soul lost between life and death, frustrated by its inability to either return to life or move on to death, being fully willing to take either option, but instead being forced to roam the earth while being invisible to those around it. It leaves one feeling powerless, directionless, and worst of all, agonizingly lonely. It's the reason many spirits are said to resort to haunting others in the first place, because they're suffering so much that they resort to making others feel their pain just to feel something, just to take back some semblance of control. The reason Yomiel is the one that made me ponder the things that define a ghost is because I believe that he's the perfect embodiment of the concept. You have a man who has been trapped in a space between life and death, existing yet being invisible at the same time, desiring to simply go to sleep forever and end it all, but not being granted the privilege to do so. But worse than any of that is the loneliness, the all-consuming, torturous loneliness of a man who has nothing left. It's enough to drive a man insane. Yomiel continues by explaining why exactly he chose to work with Commander Sith to commit the terrible crimes that he did. The first reason was for revenge, as he explained previously, but the second reason was because Sith promised him a second chance at life. Yomiel wasn't exactly sure how he intended to keep that promise, but he didn't care, because he was willing to do anything just to have his life back, just to be normal again.
I didn't care if it was a fake life, an artificial life. I just wanted a physical receptacle for my soul, a name, an identity, an everyday life. I wanted to grow old in a society that would accept me. And finally, I wanted to die surrounded by a loving family.
More than anything else, Yomiel just wanted to live a peaceful life that everyone ought to. He didn't ask to be wrongfully suspected of a crime he didn't do. He didn't ask to be struck by a stray meteorite fragment. And he didn't ask to be trapped in the purgatory that is the ghost world. He just wanted life and death, just like everyone else. Once Yomiel and Jowd have told Sissel all they can, Sissel resolves to interact with Yomiel's body now that the meteorite fragment inside it has been removed, which grants him the ability to travel back to 4 minutes before his death, back to 10 years ago when this whole thing started. And when the group does this, they determine that while they may be able to stop the meteorite fragment from hitting Yomiel, they may not be able to save his life. Despite this, Yomiel reassures them that he's willing to accept that because that would mean that he would be granted a true ending, the ending of a human, and an ending that would act as payment for the terrible things that he has done. In the end, the group does manage to change fate, but in a way that will result in Lin being crushed under the giant concrete statue named Mino. However, using his ability to manipulate living things, Yomiel possesses his past self and chooses to sacrifice himself to save her. And while he does end up surviving in the end, I think the fact that Yomiel was willing to make this sacrifice speaks volumes to how far he's come in such a brief amount of time. It wasn't very long ago when he was trying to murder the exact same girl that he ended up risking his life just to save. Jowd points this fact out to him following his sacrifice by telling him that his plan for revenge failed. And he responds by saying that he's glad it did. When pondering why he had such a change of heart, he remembers the conversation that he had with Lin and the one exchange that shifted his way of thinking entirely.
She understood. She shed tears for me. That's when my revenge was over. She saved me from the darkness.
When Yomiel was tormented by overwhelming loneliness and was willing to ruin the lives of several people in order to feel some sense of control, the thing that ultimately saved him from himself was an honest-to-goodness, human connection. A sense of compassion and empathy showing that he wasn't alone. It's important to note that shortly after Yomiel experienced his death and gained an understanding of his ability to take control of his own body once more, the first person that he went to see was his fiancée so that he could properly say goodbye to her and give her peace. However, what he found was that his fiancée had committed suicide in a desperate attempt to reunite with her love. So when Yomiel says that he lost everything and was consumed with eternal loneliness on that fateful night, he doesn't just mean that he became a ghost-like being. He also means that he lost the one person that he cared about more than anything else in the world. the only person who truly understood him and cared for him, leaving him truly alone. On that day, Yomiel lost what bound him to the mortal realm in more ways than one. And so he wandered, craving light, distorted, artificial light, to replace what had been lost, knowing full well that he would never be able to come close to replacing what he once had. However, after being reminded of what it feels like to be understood and cared for after 10 whole years, Yomiel remembered what it means to be human in the first place. And so while he's the only one who will remember his crimes from a timeline that is soon to be erased entirely, he pays for them with a smile on his face, overwhelmingly grateful to Sissel, not only for allowing him to get his just desserts, but for being granted the privilege of living the life that was so unfairly stolen from him. An everyday life where he can grow old in a society that will accept him, and a life where he can die surrounded by a loving family. Before the game closes for good, Sissel is revisited by a friend that he hasn't seen in quite some time, Ray the Desk Lamp. During his initial appearance, Ray provided the tutorial during the opening of the game, explaining Sissel's powers to him as well as how to use them. But it was always clear that he knew far, far more than he let on. He seemed to know exactly who Sissel was and how he was connected to people like Lynn, but he always remained discreet about what he knew specifically and instead opted to push him in the right direction so that he could discover the truth himself. After a while, he ends up disappearing from the junkyard that he resided in, and he remains gone for the remainder of the game, leaving players anxiously waiting to learn about who exactly he is and how exactly he knows so much. And they end up not getting their answers until the very last second, where Ray stops Sissel just before he returns back to the new future that he helped to create. He thanks Sissel for accomplishing everything that he had hoped for, and offers to reveal his identity to him in the form of a story parallel to the one that just took place, but with a few key differences. The major difference is that Sissel was unable to initially save Lynn's life, which prompts Yomiel to storm her apartment next with a trusty assassin by his side. The assassin shoots both Camila and her dog Missile, but Missile is able to awaken his ghostly powers, just as he does in the timeline that the players know and love. He's unable to save Camila with his powers alone, but he does end up going 10 years into the past to witness Yomiel's death just as Sissel does. Left with no other choice, Missile decides to wait 10 whole years just for a chance to acquire Sissel's assistance in saving both Lynn and Camila's life while disguised as a desk lamp. Though he had to wait all that time just so he could ask him again, this time with a few extra details that would give him more of an incentive to cooperate, such as the fact that he would only have until dawn to recover his lost memory, which was a bold-faced lie, but it was necessary to give Sissel the agency needed to complete his task. And this final detail at the tail end of the game's story struck me as very noteworthy because 10 years is a very, very long time to be wandering around as an aimless spirit. It's debatably a fate worse than what Yomiel had to endure, and I've already explained how tragic his situation was. At any point during that 10-year-long wait, Missile could have grown depressed and even bitter from the overwhelming amount of powerlessness and loneliness that a ghost must endure, and yet he never lost sight of his goal. This makes Missile the antithesis of Yomiel in many ways, because while they both suffer a similar fate, Missile chooses to push through the pain and suffering all so that he can protect the ones that he cares about the most. While Yomiel only grew more deranged across 10 lonely years, Missile never succumbed to the darkness, remaining laser-focused on his mission above all else. When he initially failed, he refused to accept defeat then and there. Instead, he simply tried again, regardless of how agonizing the wait was in order to obtain a second chance, until ultimately, he was able to accomplish his goal, get Sissel on the right path, and save both Lynn and Camila's lives. However, even then, after all of that waiting, all of that suffering, this version of Missile will never even be able to be a part of the future that he helped to ensure. And he's fully aware of that. You would think that that would be an awfully sad fact for him to face after everything he's been through, but once again, he accepts it without question. And that really begs the question of why? Why would Missile go through all of this effort to save two people and create a reality that he will never be able to be a part of? Why endure such a monumental amount of emptiness and loneliness, all for the sake of others? Well, because that's what doggies do. Dogs never stop to question what the sacrifice of protecting their people will be. They never for a second give up on their goal once they set their sights on it. They are unquestioning and simple-minded. And that's exactly what makes all of them, especially Missile, the world's greatest gifts. As I stated at the beginning of this video, Ghost Trick Phantom Detective is one of the most brilliant games I have ever played. And both Yomiel and Missile are major reasons why. Both characters were designed with a few key questions in mind. Questions such as, what would it be like to be immortal? How would it feel to be trapped in a purgatory? And what does it mean to be a ghost? Using these questions as starting points, Yomiel and Missile both demonstrate the loneliness that can make any form of purgatory a fate that is debatably worse than death. And each character represents the different ways that one can react to being placed in such a situation. Yomiel showcases how one can understandably react negatively to this, as he became so consumed with sorrow that it drove him to do terrible things. And it wasn't until he was shown compassion once more that he finally understood the gravity of what he had done. Conversely, Missile demonstrates the unparalleled loyalty of a dog by overcoming the same pain that Yomiel succumbed to. Not in a way that discounts Yomiel whatsoever, but in a way that shows just how far dogs are willing to go for the sake of their loved ones. Combined, these two characters have made me completely rethink what the concept of a ghost is and what it represents. And the answers that they led me to have been incredibly enlightening, incredibly heartbreaking, and yet incredibly inspiring at the same time. It's for these reasons and more that I can confidently call them some of Shu Takumi's finest creations. And it's because of them that I can easily call Ghost Trick Phantom Detective one of the greatest stories Takumi has ever told. Thank you for watching, and be sure to let me know what you think about Ghost Trick Phantom Detective down in the comments below. And while you're down there, consider hitting the subscribe button for more deep dives into all things Ace Attorney. For now though, that's all from me. Take care of yourselves.